Let's get right into it. Number 5, medieval people were walking dirt magnets. You've probably heard that people in the Middle Ages were basically walking around covered in filth, never bathing, smelling like garbage trucks. That whole idea is complete nonsense. Medieval Europeans actually cared a lot about being clean. They had public bathhouses everywhere, kind of like ancient spas. People would go there not just to wash up, but to hang out, eat meals, and socialize. By the 1400s, going to a bathhouse was as normal as going to a restaurant today. These places were packed with people relaxing in big wooden tubs, sharing food, having conversations. Everyone was expected to wash their face, hands, and other important areas at least once daily. Even peasants and farmers made sure to clean up regularly. They'd use basins, wash at horse troughs, or take quick dips in nearby streams. The wealthy obviously had better setups, but nobody was walking around caked in dirt by choice. This whole dirty medieval myth actually came from Victorian writers who wanted to make their own era look super advanced. They picked out a few gross stories from history and pretended that represented everyone back then. The truth is, medieval people understood that staying clean helped prevent disease. They had soap, they had hygiene standards, and they definitely didn't smell like walking garbage dumps. The real decline in bathing happened much later when plague outbreaks made people scared of public bathhouses. If you're enjoying these historical reality checks, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started with busting these myths. Number 4, Napoleon was a tiny, angry man. Everyone thinks Napoleon Bonaparte was this super short guy with serious height issues, right? Wrong. Napoleon was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, which was completely average for French men in his time period. So where did this whole short emperor thing come from? It's actually a perfect example of how propaganda can create lasting lies. The confusion started because of different measurement systems. When Napoleon died, his height was recorded in French measurements. But people later interpreted those numbers using English measurements, which made him seem way shorter than he actually was. A French foot was longer than an English foot, so 5'2" in French measurements equals about 5'6.5" in English measurements. British cartoonists during the Napoleonic Wars had a field day with this mix-up. They drew him as this tiny, angry little man to mock him and make him look ridiculous. These political cartoons were so popular that they actually convinced Napoleon to ask the British government to stop making fun of him. The propaganda worked so well that people still believe it today. Plus, Napoleon surrounded himself with really tall bodyguards, which made him look shorter by comparison. Standing next to a bunch of 6-foot-tall soldiers would make anyone look small. Scientists have actually studied the whole Napoleon complex idea, and guess what? It's fake too. Short men are actually less likely to lose their tempers than taller guys. The entire stereotype is built on a historical lie. Drop a comment and let us know your location so we can see where in the world people are learning the real history. Number 3, Christopher Columbus discovered America and proved the earth was round. This is probably one of the biggest historical fairy tales ever told. Columbus never set foot on what we now call the United States. He landed in the Caribbean islands and parts of Central and South America. He died thinking he'd reached Asia, not realizing he'd found a completely different continent. And that whole thing about proving the earth was round, total garbage. Educated people in Columbus's time already knew the earth was round. Greek mathematicians had figured that out over 1,000 years earlier. Medieval scholars, ship captains, and pretty much anyone with basic education understood the planet was spherical. The flat earth myth was actually invented by Washington Irving in the 1800s to make Columbus look more heroic. Irving wrote this dramatic story about Columbus bravely challenging the flat earth believers, but it was pure fiction. Columbus's real challenge wasn't convincing people the earth was round. His problem was that he completely miscalculated how big the planet was. He thought Asia was way closer than it actually was. Other navigators knew his math was wrong, which is why many people thought his voyage would fail. When Columbus did make it across the ocean, he got incredibly lucky that there happened to be 2 entire continents sitting right where he expected to find Asia. Without the Americas being there, his ships would have run out of supplies, and everyone would have died in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Number 2, Vikings wore horned helmets into battle. Every Viking movie, Halloween costume, and history book illustration shows these fierce warriors charging into battle with horned helmets. But real Vikings never wore anything like that. This whole horned helmet thing was completely made up by opera costume designers in the 1800s. They were creating outfits for Wagner's operas and thought horns would look more dramatic on stage. They accidentally created one of history's biggest costume lies. Think about it practically for a second. Going into battle wearing something that gives your enemy two perfect handles to grab your head is not exactly smart fighting strategy. Those horns would also get caught on tree branches during raids, trap you in doorways, and make it impossible to use a shield properly. Real Viking helmets that archaeologists have actually found were simple, practical protective gear. Some had nose guards, but most were just basic metal caps designed to keep your skull in one piece. There were some horned helmets found in Denmark, but they were from about 3,000 years before the Vikings even existed. These ancient helmets weren't for fighting either. They were ceremonial pieces, like fancy crowns for religious rituals. Some opera costume designer probably saw pictures of these ancient ceremonial helmets in a museum and thought they'd be perfect for making Vikings look more intimidating on stage. Now millions of people think Vikings ran around looking like they had antlers growing out of their heads. Before we get to our final myth, smash that share button and spread some real history to your friends. Let's get right into it. Number 1, the Great Wall of China is visible from space. This is probably the most repeated space myth in history, and it's completely wrong. Astronauts have been debunking this claim for decades, but somehow it keeps getting passed around like it's scientific fact. The Great Wall is wide enough for horses and soldiers, but from space, that's basically invisible. We're talking about a structure that's maybe 30 feet wide, trying to be seen from hundreds of miles up. That's like trying to spot a single hair on someone's head from across a football stadium. The myth probably started because the Great Wall is really, really long. It stretches for thousands of miles across China, so people figured something that massive must be visible from orbit. But length doesn't equal visibility from space. A fishing line could stretch around the entire planet, but you still wouldn't be able to see it from the International Space Station. What's really ironic is that astronauts can actually see tons of man-made stuff from space, just not the Great Wall. City lights, major highways, large dams, and airports show up clearly in photos. The Great Wall blends in perfectly with the natural landscape around it because it was built using local materials. Even Chinese astronauts have confirmed they can't see their country's most famous landmark from orbit. Yang Liwei, China's first astronaut, specifically looked for the Great Wall during his mission and couldn't spot it anywhere. NASA has repeatedly stated that the Great Wall is not visible to the naked eye from space. You'd need a telescope and perfect weather conditions to maybe catch a glimpse of it, and even then you'd have to know exactly where to look. This myth has been so persistent that it's taught in schools and mentioned in documentaries, but every single person who's actually been to space and looked for it will tell you the same thing. The Great Wall of China is invisible from space, and that's just the reality of how big space actually is compared to anything we've built down here on Earth. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them. There you have it. 5 massive historical lies that somehow became accepted facts. Medieval people actually cared about hygiene and bathed regularly. Napoleon was average height for his time, not some tiny dictator with anger issues. Columbus never discovered America or proved the earth was round. Vikings never wore those ridiculous horned helmets into battle. And the Great Wall of China is completely invisible from space. The crazy thing is how these myths keep spreading even when we have tons of evidence proving them wrong. It shows how powerful propaganda, measurement mix-ups, and Hollywood can be in shaping what people believe about the past. Victorian writers wanted to make their era look more advanced, so they made medieval times sound disgusting. British cartoonists wanted to mock Napoleon, so they drew him as a midget. Opera costume designers wanted dramatic Vikings, so they stuck horns on their heads. History is way more interesting when you know what actually happened instead of these made-up stories. Next time someone tries to tell you any of these myths, you can blow their mind with the real facts. And who knows what other historical lies are sitting in your brain right now, just waiting to be busted. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.